Why your brain makes you reread the same book instead of starting a new one. There is a peculiar comfort in knowing exactly what happens on page 243. A feeling that a brand new story simply cannot provide regardless of how many awards it has won. You might feel a bit guilty about it, like you're failing to expand your horizons or wasting your cognitive potential on a plot you've already memorized. But this habit isn't a sign of a stagnant mind. It's actually a sophisticated tool your brain uses to navigate a world that often feels like it's spinning out of control. The reason you keep going back to that same fictional world says much more about your current emotional state than it does about your reading level, and once you see the mechanism behind it, you'll realize those old pages are doing a lot more heavy lifting than you thought. The primary reason you reach for a familiar story during a difficult week is a survival mechanism designed to minimize cognitive load and maximize emotional safety. Your brain is constantly scanning for threats and predicting the future, which is an exhausting process that burns through your mental energy. When you pick up a new book, your brain has to work overtime to build a new world, track new names, and brace itself for potential emotional shocks or plot twists. However, when you open a book you've read 5 times, that predictive engine gets to take a nap because there is zero risk of an unpleasant surprise. You aren't just reading, you're performing a ritual of perceptual fluency, where the ease of processing the information creates a genuine sense of pleasure and calm. Think about a day where everything went wrong. The car wouldn't start, your boss was breathing down your neck, and you felt like you couldn't get a win. In that state, the last thing you want is the stress of a protagonist you don't know facing a conflict you can't predict. You choose the old book because you need a guaranteed outcome where the hero wins or the mystery is solved, providing a sense of order that your real life is currently lacking. This isn't just about being lazy with your entertainment, it's a form of emotional regulation that allows you to hit the reset button on your nervous system. It raises a fascinating question. If the joy of reading is supposed to be about discovery, why does your brain feel so much more alive when it's revisiting something it already knows? Beyond just seeking safety, you use these stories as a psychological yardstick to measure how much you have changed since the last time you turned these pages. Researchers who look into reconsumptive experiences found that people don't just return to books for the plot, but for the active synthesis of their past and present selves. When you read a favorite book at age 15, you might have identified with the rebellious teenager, but reading it again at 30, you suddenly find yourself empathizing with the tired parents. The ink on the page hasn't changed a single bit, but because you have, the story transforms into a completely different experience. This creates a unique type of nostalgic time travel, where you aren't just visiting a fictional world, but visiting the version of yourself that lived there years ago. Imagine opening a copy of a novel you loved in college and seeing a coffee stain or a dog-eared page from a night you stayed up late reading. That physical book becomes a container for your memories, and rereading it allows you to check in on your own growth in a way a new book never could. You are essentially using the static nature of the story to highlight the dynamic nature of your own life, finding new layers of meaning that were invisible to you during your first or second pass. This process provides a deep sense of continuity, reminding you that even though your circumstances have shifted, there is a core part of you that still resonates with these specific themes. If the book is the constant, then you are the variable, and rereading is the only way to see exactly how far you've actually traveled. What most people miss is that rereading isn't a retreat from reality, but a way to build the emotional resilience needed to face it. By revisiting these familiar landscapes, you are effectively refueling your empathy and your sense of self in a space where you cannot be judged or surprised. It's a form of self-therapy where you choose the therapist, the author, who you already know understands your specific brand of loneliness or your specific need for adventure. The most profound realization is that you aren't actually reading the same book over again. You are reading a new book through the lens of a more experienced soul. Every time you close that familiar cover, you aren't just finishing a story. You're acknowledging that the person who started the book this time is slightly different from the one who will pick it up next year. Which book is the one you've returned to so many times that you could practically recite the first chapter? And what do you think that specific story provides for you that nothing else can?